Yep. Give me a thumbs up when you're up to start. I'll keep an eye down around here. Hello. Hello, I'm Jennifer. Hi, nice to meet you. Yes.
Here's my Irish passport as well, by the way.
Okay, good. I'm moderating the whole day. Yeah. Yeah. Well, will they take the music down? So. Good morning. Those of you who are still finishing your coffee, come on in, sit down. We're going to get started. The commissioner's here already, so we're going to try and be timely today. My name is Jennifer Baker. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a technology policy journalist based here in Brussels, and I'm going to be moderating today. And my job is going to be to try and get you all to be involved in the discussion and actually make my life easier so that you're going to ask the questions of our really informed panelists that we will have giving showcases and presentations. A little bit of housekeeping. There is Wi-Fi. It's on your badge, the password and the details. It's a little bit iffy if you have an Apple device. So for that, we have a fallback option, which is Wi-Fi concert-noble. You can find it if you search for it. And the password for that is Edificio 2018 exclamation mark. That's EDIFICIO 2018 exclamation mark. Turn your phones to silent, but don't turn them off. Tweet using the hashtag Connecting Europe. And with that, I will call up Commissioner Gabriel to give us our keynote speech and tell us why Connecting Europe for the digital single market is so important.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to share with us some of my thoughts of my team, but I would like just to say thank you. Thank you for organizing this discussion, and thank you for your work for all of us, for us as a citizens, but for us as Europe. First, I would like to start by saying that as the European Union prepares to enter negotiations for the next multi-annual financial framework, it is important for us to remind ourselves of the real value of the European project and concrete benefits for European citizens, businesses and public administrations. In this spirit, we have gathered here today to learn about how the Connecting Europe facility building blocks help build cross-border digital public services for the benefit of all. In the digital age, the European Commission and the European Member States have developed and piloted common standards and technical specifications, a digital acquis, which is at the heart of the building blocks. Today, you will hear inspiring testimonials about how the building blocks support policy at the European, national and local level and foster the implementation of European legislation. We will also hear about future building blocks and how new building blocks are fundamental to extending an interoperable digital ecosystem in Europe. Where are we now? President Juncker made establishing a connected digital single market one of the European Commission's 10 political priorities. Through the Digital Single Market Initiative, the European Union is ensuring that the digital transformation is an opportunity for European citizens, businesses and member states, and I see the building blocks as an important element of it. The building blocks, you know that we currently have e-delivery, e-ID, e-signature, e-invoicing and e-translation, make it easier to interconnect complex digital services and IT systems across Europe, creating a digital single market. They offer basic capabilities that can be reused in any European project to facilitate the delivery of digital public services across borders and sectors. The building blocks are common elements built on common standards and technical specifications. Just as the acquis communautaire provides common rules for the single market, the building blocks are, as standards and technical specifications, in effect common rules supporting the creation of the digital single market. The building blocks are common elements that can be easily rearranged and combined to create pan-European digital services such as e-health and e-justice. Such common elements are essential for the provision of digital public services across borders. The Connecting Europe facility building blocks are currently being deployed throughout Europe. Just for example, currently 246 e-delivery access points have been set up across Europe, allowing for the secure exchange of data between member states and business. There are now 166 qualified trust service providers able to support interoperable electronic signatures throughout Europe, cutting the time required to sign documents from days to minutes. There are also multiple examples of Connecting Europe success stories. The European e-Justice portal, which uses all the building blocks apart from invoicing, is one example. Over 10 million citizens are involved in cross-border judicial procedure every year. That means a far greater need for cooperation between different national judicial systems and improved access to information on the judicial process in different European countries. Common, interoperable standards, such as for electronic invoicing, also remove barriers to economic activity across member states, thus contributing to the wider European economy. In Denmark, for example, electronic invoicing saves taxpayers 150 million and businesses 50 million per year. If introduced across the EU, annual savings could exceed 50 billion. In Italy alone, e-procurement systems cut over 3 billion in costs. While EU legislation supports the widespread adoption of invoicing in Europe by defining a European standard for invoicing, the self-invoicing building block helps public administrations and business to quickly adopt the European standard. Ladies and gentlemen, we can only get the best out of the opportunities offered by digital tools, online networks and digital services if we trust them. People may hesitate to use digital services, maybe not use them at all, if they are not confident that they are reliable, safe and secure. The self-building blocks are built in compliance with the eIDAS regulation. The eIDAS regulation establishes a regulatory framework to enable secure and seamless electronic interactions between businesses, citizens, and public authorities in order to increase the effectiveness of public and private online services in the EU. So, how do we move forward? Europe needs public administrations and services that are modern, flexible, and accessible across borders. These are key elements of an open, efficient, and inclusive digital economy. In the EU single market, People are able to move freely, either for work or privately, so they need to be able to access public services outside their home country. IT systems and digital infrastructure are now at the heart of government processes, but efforts are still needed to ensure they continue to improve the delivery of fully digital government services to European citizens. Gathered in Estonia earlier this year, the national ministers confirmed their commitment to the vision laid out in the EU e-government action plan 2016-2020 and in the European interoperability framework. The Tallinn e-government declaration underlines that there is a need for interoperability by default, reinforcing trust and confidence for building a digital single market in Europe. The Member States even explicitly called on the Commission to prepare proposals on the future, post-2020, and sustainability of existing EU-level cross-border digital service infrastructures and building blocks. A mid-term review of the e-government action plan in 2018 will be a good occasion to respond to this request and to update the priorities. The overall vision for digital public administration of the future is to be open, efficient, and inclusive, and provide borderless, interoperable, personalized, user-friendly, end-to-end digital public services to all citizens and businesses. To conclude, why are the building blocks important and why are they fundamental to achieve the digital single market? Just as the acquis communautaire is fundamental for the realization of the internal market, we require a digital acquis, common standards and technical specifications to ensure the realization of a digital single market. This digital acquis will enable pan-European interoperability and the provision of platform-based cross-border public services. In his State of the Union speech, President Juncker outlined an ambitious vision for the future of Europe, noting when he's back in Europe sales. We have now the unique opportunity and the obligation to use this momentum and to catch the wind in our sails. Let us work together and build Europe's digital future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad you mentioned post-2020, because one of the things we're going to try and do today is look to the future and ask what's next. And with that, we are a slight change to our schedule. What is next is actually going to be the first part of our day. Our MEP will come and give us a speech later on. And we're going to focus here particularly on eIDAS and how to create a digital marketplace. And our first speaker on that is Maximilian Strootman, who is from the Cabinet of European Commission Vice President Andrus Ansip. Thank you, Max.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, Commissioner. Thank you for your opening words that I think have set the whole scene. So what else remains to be said? And maybe you allow me a sort of a private word in the very beginning. When I was a boy, I was really a fan of Lego. You know, I think I can say I have a very distinguished career in building blocks, even knowing that you are an audience that is building its career and building Europe on these building blocks. But I always loved it because it was sort of a standardized little thing that even for me, who maybe is not the most creative person in the world, otherwise maybe I wouldn't have become a public official, but even for me, it gave me the possibility to build the wildest of things and to unlock this creativity. This session, now that I have the honor just to say a few words in the beginning, is about the marketplace. And I love this word because it immediately links to what the Commissioner has set out, linking it to the broader design and the philosophy of the digital single market. Sometimes people say this is just the market, this is not about people. But the marketplace has always been the place where people gathered, where they exchanged ideas and goods, and where new things were created. And already here you find the way back to the creativity. The digital single market strategy tries exactly to do what historic markets always have done, to set a common rule book, to set a few standards, a few rules that if we apply them, then it unlocks enormous freedom. It gives peace. It is a place where you can trust to come. It is safety. And you see all these words that I think was not even very difficult to take out, hint at what EI does, what the building blocks, what the Connecting Europe facility is here about creating exactly this. So we need, in the digital single market, to regulate away barriers and difficulties, and on the other hand, give trust and certainty in what we are doing, and authentication to say who you are and be able to prove who you are is one of the basic elements of any marketplace, whether it's online or whether it's offline. And this has always been actually one of the core elements of public activity. I am given a card that with this card I can authenticate myself. In the past, physically. And today, it is online in a digital environment. I need safe links. I need to know whom I can trust to give my data, whether this is in a public counter in some public office or whether it is on the marketplace. And now it is about linking up to the network on an online marketplace, and trust services. Sometimes I need somebody to give me a stamp and say, yes, I've been here, I have been there at this time, and I've been in time for my application for a job or something else. These elements around, if you allow me to take a step back, is why we think that the broader e-government discussion, public services discussion is so elementary in the digital single market. This is something that is sometimes forgotten, and we discussed it in the past and said, oh, it's a geeky sort of specialized area. No, it is not. Together with connectivity, together with cybersecurity, together with data flows, it is one of the key enablers of a functioning digital single market, just like an historic marketplace has always been. This is where our cities were built out. Hundreds and thousands of years ago, people created safe marketplaces where the traders to come and build new services. To unlock this creativity is behind the model or our thinking of the digital single market, and certainly the building blocks and the broader e-government policy. So I'm very happy that this panel in particular is demonstrating how the private sector can link and take advantage of an environment and creativity-enabling environment that is built through the public sector, reducing cost, increasing trust. This was something that we feel sometimes is slow to pick up. If you allow me one final word, I'm not Estonian, so I can use an Estonian example. Mr. Ansip is always super annoyed and says, no, I don't want to use yet another Estonian example. But it was exactly the making available of a public-supported electronic ID that unlocked much of the development that today we have seen has helped us to build a digital nation there. So I'm super curious to hear from the private sector what is coming up, and I hand over to Jen and wish you a great day playing with Legos, but real time. That's brilliant. Thanks.
Well, Max is doing my job for me. He's telling you what's coming up next, which is, of course, the private sector. And to tell us now about EID, particularly in the banking sector, it's Isabel Cook, Digital Identity Proposition Manager from Barclays.
Great, so thank you very much. As Jen just said, my name's Isabel Cook. I work in Barclays Information Business. And what we seek to do is utilize the wealth of data that Barclays has to create really interesting and useful propositions for our customers and our clients. And so I specifically work on our digital identity proposition. And that's where we're looking to enable UK citizens and people within the UK to transact online more easily, to help prove who they are when they're interacting with organizations online. Oh, is this my clicker? Next. I'm going to go with the one that says next. Great. Because as we all know, there's a really key problem with the internet, and that is that it really wasn't built with identity in mind. So organizations really struggle to know who is it that sat behind that keyboard. And so because of that, they create these really lengthy application forms, and we have to sit and retype our name and address and date of birth and all sorts of information time and time and time again. And that gets relatively tedious for us as individuals in a world where, technology should really be making our lives easier. And so as well as that, organizations also then, they generally request, so they know who you are when you're coming back to them, that you create an account with them. And that's relatively helpful for them. They can keep a good track of who their customers are and who's interacting with them online. But for you as an individual, it's just another username and password to have to remember. Experian reported that we on average have 25 different usernames and 5 different passwords across those. So that's quite a lot for us to have to remember, and it just gets relatively laborious. And to make matters worse, when something exciting happens in your life, if you move house or if you get married and want to change your name, you then have to remember all of those different organizations that you've interacted with online and set these accounts up with, and go back to them to manually update that data time and time again. And that's just poor user experience. Then we start bringing in the problem of fraud. CFAS have estimated that there were 89,000 cases of identity theft in the UK in the first 6 months alone. And that's over 500 cases per day. Fraudsters are going online, taking bits of data about us, and even just taking our username and password credentials and pretending to be us. And so we at Barclays are starting to look at digital identity, or EID. And more specifically, so I'm sure many of you'll know all about EID because you'll be from countries where there's a scheme in place which you're using every single day to log into public services or private services, but we don't have that yet in the UK. There are some EID schemes there, but we don't have something which all citizens are using yet. And so we're starting to explore that. And for those of you who may also be from the UK or from countries which don't yet have one, I'll do a quick base set, a level set as to what I'm referring to by digital identity, or EID. So I generally see this as something which you can create once and then reuse many, many times. You'll generally need to go through an identity verification process with an identity provider, of which Barclays is one in the UK for the gov.uk Verify programme. And what that means is generally these identity providers, they want to be able to know, firstly, that the identity you're claiming to have is a real identity, so it's not a fake identity. And secondly, that you're the actual owner of that identity. So you may have to do some pieces of evidence providing, so for example, passport details, or they might check certain bits of data about you with authoritative sources. In the UK, we have credit reference agencies which we can use to check bits of data. And then once they're able to satisfy that you've reached that level of assurance, that level of certainty that they know that your identity is real and you're the owner of it, they can then create you a digital identity. But so that you can use that digital identity again in multiple different places, they'll then require you to bind that to an authentication mechanism. And that sounds far more complicated than it actually is. You'll have come across many of these in your day-to-day life. But generally, they're broken down into 3 categories. The first is something I know. So this is things like username and password, or we have knowledge-based verification, where they ask you questions where they already know the answer and just want to check that you know the answer as well. Then you have things like something I have. So banks traditionally have used little hardware tokens that they post out to you, and they give you a little code, and you tap the code in, and it generates a new code, and then you use that new code on your online banking. But actually, now most people are just using the mobile phone as the something I have. And then you've got something I am, and that's where biometrics starts to come into play. So things like fingerprint or facial recognition as well. And generally, it's deemed that as long as you're using a good mix of at least two of these, then you're going to start to reach a relatively strong level of authentication. So once you've done your identity verification and you've bound it to an authentication mechanism, you should then be free to use your digital identity in multiple different places. So I've put up here public services and also some services in the private sector, like banking or insurance. But in reality, this should be something which you can use in any industry that's seeking to understand really who their customer is sat behind that keyboard, and also to make that journey more frictionless. And so at Barclays, we're also participating in a Connecting Europe facility project under that EID building block, which is looking at exploring how can an EU citizen use their national digital identity to open a bank account in another EU country. And that's really aligning to the European digital single market, because we're looking to break down some of the barriers of cross-border commerce using these digital tools. And so, for this specific project, we're looking at the one journey, which is for a French citizen to use their France Connect ID to open a bank account within the UK. But we're very much hoping that the learnings that we have and the infrastructure that we build is something that can then be reused across different variations of countries as well. And there are a number of project participants. So you have Orange, who are the IDP in France as part of the France Connect. And then you've got IDEMIA, who are going to be the UK infrastructure, that inbound node to receive the data from France Connect. And then the relying parties here, or the service providers, as is also known, are the banks. So Barclays and HSBC have chosen to participate in the program in that role. And finally, you've got the Government Digital Service and the Open Identity Exchange, who are generally providing lots of advice and overseeing the project. And this project is looking to align to the eIDAS framework. And as you all know, and as you mentioned earlier, that's only now for the public services. But we're looking at how can we use this framework, this infrastructure in the private sector. And again, as I'm sure many of you know, in the EID space, currently Germany are the only country that I'm aware of that have notified their EID scheme thus far. So we've had to work under the assumption that more countries will start notifying their schemes as well. And so why are the banks involved? Well, you may be surprised. I was surprised when I heard this stat that in the UK, up to 50% of our new account openings are from citizens who are originally from overseas. So if we can make that onboarding process much easier, much faster, and much more secure for them to open bank accounts with us, then that's only going to really improve that journey for them. Fraud is another key issue, which digital identity can start to help tackle. So Experian's fraud report in 2016 quoted that the cases of current account theft had doubled from the year before. And the Fraud Action Report in 2016 estimated that fraud on UK-issued cards had reached £618 million. So it's a huge issue, and I'm not saying digital identity can solve all of that problem, but it can certainly help with some of it. KYC costs is another piece. So KYC banks are required to do due diligence on knowing who their customers are. And those costs are relatively high now for banks. Thomson Reuters estimated that banks spend £40 million on their KYC. And actually, the top-end bank was £300 million. So these are some real reasons as to why the private sector might want to start using these digital tools that are being provided and built. And so what is this project looking to deliver? We're ultimately looking at a number of different key considerations. So firstly, the operating model. How is data going to flow from one party to the other? What's the user journey going to look like? We're also exploring the liability model. There is a liability model under the eIDAS framework, but again, it's for public services. Does that need to change when it comes to the private sector? What happens if a fraudulent identity is created and then brought in and someone uses that to open a bank account with an overdraft facility, so some sort of credit facility? They max that out and then they don't pay that back. Does the liability stay with the bank because they decided to consume the digital identity? Or does it flow back through to the identity provider? If any of the liability does flow, is that a limited liability, a capped liability? So these are things which we're really starting to tease out and consider. Another thing is the commercial model, because these are private sector organizations, so they're going to be wanting to be paid for their services. And so we're not looking at specific prices or estimating volumes, but we're looking at where will the revenue streams flow. And finally, additional attributes, because as you'll all know, to open a bank account, you need more than just an identity. We need more information than the minimum data set that's provided under the eIDAS framework. And so we're having to explore where can we get that additional data from when a customer's coming from overseas? Can we rely on the individual to self-attest their data? And does some of it need to be verified? Do we need to check that with other authoritative sources? And if so, who can they be? And where can we get the data from? And what's the liability framework there? And how do we know that it can meet the same level of assurance that the identity itself has met? So these are all really important things that we need to consider. And we're about midway through the project, so we're hoping to release a white paper in July next year, which I hope you'll all read. And as well as that, another output we're hoping to deliver is a prototype. And this prototype will be looking to explore that channel for a French citizen to use their France Connect ID to open that UK bank account. At the moment, we're hoping to be able to release relatively soon just some wireframes of that prototype. So it'll just be sort of some screens to show the journey. And we'd love to get everyone's feedback. That will go onto the Open Identity Exchange website. And I guess it's worth noting, we're not painting a real future post-2020 of what is this going to look like really far ahead. We're trying to create what would this look like if it were to be implemented, as soon as possible. So it's absolutely not going to be perfect. It's not 3 clicks and you're done. But we're looking to build a realistic model of what will that journey look like for citizens. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabel. And if you have questions, we will be having our panel discussion after we've had all our showcases, so you can ask Isabel for more details on everything she's spoken about. Our next speaker is going to look a little bit more at the mobile world, and that is Marta Jenko, who is the Head of Government and Regulatory Affairs in GSMA, the GSM Association. Thank you, Marta.
Hi, good morning, everyone. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me to speak to this conference today. Today I'm going to speak to you about the eIDAS and Mobile Connect pilot project and how to combine, which aims to combine a cross-border EID recognition from the eIDAS service framework with the convenience for users and online service providers over the mobile. Just before I start, a few words about what I'm going to talk about today. First, I would like to offer a few comments about the importance of the digital identity and the role the mobile operators play in enabling the digital identity and making a market a reality. And also describe what is the role of mobile operators through the work of Mobile Connect to enable and secure and safe and reliable digital identity. Of course, in cooperation and in partnership with governments through this pilot that we are working on. So before I start, let me give a few words about the GSMA. So the GSMA is the Mobile World Trade Association of operators around the world. We represent the interests of more than 800 operators worldwide. And we have also other companies coming from adjacent sectors of the economy, coming from utilities, financial sectors, and media and utilities. We operate in more than 220 countries, and we connect to more than 27,000 experts, which are experts in the industry and are looking at the importance and relevance of mobile for the digital economy. So at the GSMA, as well as producing some of the major events from the industry, we also very much focus on initiatives where concerted action can lead to significant benefits for the industry and the mobile and the broader economy. And one of those programs, together with Spectrum, Connected Living, is Identity. So the identity program is really the effort of operators and the GSMA to provide and enable operators to have a central role and a strategic role in the digital identity ecosystem while enabling collaboration and partnership with the broader ecosystem. So on the importance of digital identity, So digital identity, as everybody knows, is a key enabler to the digital economy. It provides significant benefits to socioeconomic and financial development. The transformation to digital identity is already underway. As transactions are increasingly going online, they're also moving towards the mobile. In Europe, 53% of transactions are conducted over a mobile. And of course, underpinning trusted digital identity security is of utmost of great importance, but is of course not an easy task. Excuse me. There are, of course, SMS, OTP, one-time password, username, and password are, extremely, available, but certainly neither secure or convenient. And there are increasingly solutions which are available in the market which strengthen the role of mobile and the use of network attributes for identity. Regulators, of course, are increasingly working on this issue and are creating the perfect conditions for enabling a digital environment underpinned by trusted identities. eIDAS, PSD2, GDPR are all the underpinning blocks that define the legal framework for identity. In the US, the National Institute for Standard Technology is also working on guidelines for digital identity, which are providing, the minimum standards framework for identity as well in the US. And UNCITRAL is also working on initiatives for defining a possible model legislation law for legal issue of identity management and trust services. In terms of the work of mobile operators, so mobile operators' work in this space is not only about reach, it's also and primarily about security. So together with mobile operators, as I was saying, within our identity program, we are working on a solution that is simple, secure, and convenient for the users to provide access to online services. So using the experience and the strengths of capabilities the mobile operators have in delivering security and fast and secure authentication to users, we are working on service platform framework, which based on a multi-factor authentication solutions, which enable users to authenticate, authorize, verify identity, and confirm attributes about the users or the device. So this gives you this map. I just wanted to pull it up. Gives an idea of the operators and the efforts that are happening not only in Europe but worldwide to implement these consistent open standards enabled by 3 billion users worldwide, technically enabled by the Mobile Connect technical infrastructure, and 105 million registered users. In terms of the work that we are doing with government services, but more broadly to enable digital identity to the private sector as well, we are working with several partners around the world. We are working with the National Institute of Standard Technology on a pilot and proof of concept to use Mobile Connect for authentication, identification, and attribute services in the financial service, in consumer goods, health, and the government services. In Europe, with France Connect, there is a live service that Rebecca just mentioned that operates and provides identity authentication for French citizens to access online government services through the single online portal of France Connect. In the UK, we are working on initiatives to enable the work of mobile operators to access government services, as well in partnership with Barclays as part of the larger consortium on the self-funded project through eIDAS. And then we have also for Europe, and within the eIDAS context, a larger pilot on Mobile Connect and eIDAS, which are going to describe you in a minute. So, as I was saying, this is a larger pilot which is building on the success and learnings from a first proof of concept that was held in 2015. and is trying to create a multi-stakeholder public and private sector cooperations to deliver commercially viable government-backed pilot to demonstrate how mobile operators can, through the support of Mobile Connect, can deploy and scale IDAS within 2 or more European countries through the IDAS node. So we are aiming to develop and test IDAS reference architecture to demonstrate the interoperability of Mobile Connect with private and private sector service providers with the IDAS nodes integration requirements capabilities. And as a use case, we are using a user-centric approach to use Mobile Connect and combining strong authentication with IDAS identity services in the Internet of Things for healthcare application environment. So in terms of the pilot and a little bit more detail, what we are trying to demonstrate and to showcase are really a combination of the work of the mobile operators with IDAS really provides the success factors for market take-up. There are a number of differentiators which enable those to be achieved. In particular, I'm referring to the capabilities of Mobile Connect framework or mobile identity to offer interoperable, decentralized federation layer to be built and integrated on top of national EID, using identity asserted by the IDAS node and leveraging strong customer authentication that mobile operators can enable that can also be seamlessly authenticated wherever you are when citizens are traveling abroad. So those are to go in a little bit more detail, those are the pilot's components. So we are using the France Connect as a IDAS proxy service to enable access of Mobile Connect in a live environment through Orange and Area Next. We are using Diffi IDAS node in Norway to provide as a IDAS node proxy service to provide access to Mobile Connect in Norway, and we are using the IDAS connector of Estonia to enable services. In terms of the use case is enabling patient and doctor to travel in Estonia. So, for example, if you are a patient of Norway and you are traveling to Estonia, or you are coming from France, or you are coming to Estonia and you require access to healthcare services, you can strongly authenticate using Mobile Connect and providing as asserted by the IDAS node. And one important component also is that I mentioned is how we are enabling an identity management system which is user-centric and enable the user to control its identity under a digital entitlement model. So we are almost coming to an end of this pilot. We have already had several workshops and discussions with governments that I mentioned and operators. So the pilot is will be launched in Barcelona in February, and we will also publish a white paper that I hope will provide some learnings and understanding of what we have been doing. So before I finish, I just would like to leave you with a few words. I think that mobile operators are somehow in a privileged position to provide identity. However, they cannot work in isolation. We really need to work together with broader ecosystem and in particular with governments. Mobile Connect and our framework, as we have designed, is provide a simple user experience with a strong focus on privacy and is really sort of flexible in terms of providing seamless and reliable authentication to the user. If you would like to know more about this project or what we are doing in the GSMA, this is my address, so please get in touch with me, and very many thanks for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marta. So our next speaker is David Hickson, a software architect at IBM, and he is going to tell us about the benefits and particularly the Connecting Europe facility and how that has addressed the needs of the private sector, particularly also with regard to using common standards. David, thank you very much.
Hi, she said, I'm Dave Hickson, software architect. I've been in IBM pretty much my entire career, and I have always been in B2B since the beginning. So I've probably led the development of most of IBM's B2B products, organically grown products. And because of that, I guess most recently the one that I led was the IBM Advanced Communication Gateway, which supports AS4. And because of that, I was asked to join and represent IBM, the tech lead in the eSENS large-scale pilot. And let's see. I'm hitting next, but it does not seem to be advancing. Is there a trick to this? No, I think I went too far. Now back doesn't work? Oh, wait. Okay. So in the eSENS large-scale pilot for the e-delivery building block, we basically piloted several parts of it. The four-corner model, the dynamic discovery, which is how we were able to, I guess, find trading partners without onboarding them, the AS4 profile, and we also did like interoperability testing and conformance testing. And now I'm going to show you, since we concluded this last year successfully, and now we've moved on, and I've most recently led the creation of a service at IBM for e-delivery, based on the e-delivery building block. So I'm going to show you a video now on what we did for the large-scale pilot. Can you cue the video? Or? Okay, I guess I'll just tell you what we did. So in the pilot, we wanted to show how e-delivery could cross borders. So we set up 3 different tendering systems: Evergabe, which is the German tendering system, TenderNet, which is the tendering system for the Netherlands, and Ethics, which is the Danish government. And IBM specifically, we did everything for the IBM Denmark for the Danish. And we showed that it was possible to publish tenders so that so that, say, within Denmark, the Danish government could publish a tender, and then that could be read by any country in Europe for the first time. So someone in the Netherlands could actually get information. They could subscribe to this particular tender. They could bid on this tender, and they could even get invoice for this particular tender. And so we showed that between Netherlands, Denmark, and Germany, all those 3 countries, you could publish tenders, and you could, I guess, actual companies could receive the information and invoice it. So that particular pilot was designed to show that e-delivery will actually add new cross-border functionality and break down barriers to actually bidding on contracts. So within the context of that particular pilot, one company that had never actually submitted a tender to anywhere other than their own country actually for the first time bid on contracts in other countries. So that was, I guess, the essence of that particular pilot. Then So after that pilot concluded, like I said, we had, at IBM, we've created an e-delivery service, an access point, okay, and we've been marketing that. And so for the rest of the presentation, I was just going to tell you about how that actually has changed things. Now, for the better. Now, with IBM, we usually deal with large corporations, and we help large hubs and to onboard a lot of trading partners or to automate their processes. So, for example, the UK National Health Service right now wants to open up or do all of their procurement electronically. So, and they have tens of thousands of partners. And that's the kind of thing that we typically do, something like the UK National Health Service or a Walmart, a large retailer and such. And we find that we've done this quite often. There are 3 phases that we go through in order to do this. First, we have to plan and design how we're going to reliably exchange messages, and many decisions have to be made at this point, okay? There is a lot of security and stuff that I'll get into a little bit later. The second part is actually conducting the campaign. So now you have to go out and make a list of tens of thousands, potentially, of trading partners that you want to actually start working with. And that's a big effort. I'll talk about that a little bit and how e-delivery affects that. And then the last part is when you get into your steady state, you have to add new trading partners and you have to, I guess, remove access for trading partners that you don't use anymore. Once again, I can't seem to move forward. Okay. Okay, in the planning phase, B2B message exchange is fairly complicated, particularly with AS4. AS4 has many message exchange patterns, okay? There are one-way and two-way, which is a request and response that you can combine. You can push messages. I mean, I can initiate them. You can use pull, which means I'm going to put messages up and then people will come get them when they want. You have to make decisions about all that. There are many P modes, we call processing modes for each pattern. There's encryption and decryption. Do you want to use that? What algorithms are you going to use? AES 128, GCM, etc. Compression, what type of compression, if you're going to use it or not. Authentication and digital signature, how are we going to authenticate these messages? What types of certificates are we going to use? What algorithms are we going to use? Are we going to use credentials? If so, how are we going to distribute those particular credentials and manage them? Certificate revocation lists, how are we going to control if certificates get revoked? Are we going to use acknowledgements? What about reliability? Are we going to use WS reliability? Error reporting? Are we going to do this synchronously, asynchronously? Notifications? What about large files? How are we going to handle large files? Are we going to use chunked or non-chunked? Are we going to use features such as split and join? So anyway, it's very complex, okay? And once you go through this huge process, the output is usually called what we call an implementation guide. So we sit down with a company and we go through all of this, and it's a big consulting effort and figure out how to do that, right? Or really how they want to do business. Well, the e-delivery business building block has an AS4 profile, and basically all that has been done for you by some very smart people who are actually on the AS4 technical committees have contributed to this. All the best algorithms for safest for encryption and such are specified, and now you don't have to worry about that at all. So that part of the e-delivery building block, which is the AS4 profile, is a tremendous time saver. Plus it creates far more secure, since it ensures you're using best practices for security and reliability. It will probably result in a more secure, more reliable than if you did it yourself. So we found that this can pretty much eliminate this whole phase that we spend of educating and working with a company on planning out exactly how to do their message exchange. The second part is actually conducting this onboarding campaign. And onboarding a large number of customers is a huge effort. Credentials must be assigned, certificates have to be exchanged, testing must be performed, and IBM has a lot of sophisticated tools that we've developed specifically to help with this, workflow tools that will allow testing and approvals, self-onboarding tools that will email or send an email to your trading partners, and then there's a link and they can come and they can upload their certificate. But still, it's a large effort. I mean, it can take years to actually onboard thousands or tens of thousands of trading partners. Now, with dynamic discovery, so it's another part of the e-delivery building block is dynamic discovery. And with dynamic discovery, you don't actually have to onboard your trading partners. Each trading partner onboards himself once to the e-delivery network. And in order for you to talk to them, you don't have to onboard them at all. You don't have to maintain any information on them. For example, here I have this screen where, I guess prior to e-delivery, we would actually go in and each trading partner had to be set up. So this is an AS4 setup screen. If you had 10,000 trading partners, you had to go through this 10,000 times. And then constantly things are changing. You'd have to come back here and review it. Well, with the e-delivery building block, dynamic discovery, we don't have to do that. We have really one configuration which says I can talk to, I'll allow my system to talk to the e-delivery network. And now any trading partner out there, which could be basically any company in Europe, you can communicate with them. And you don't need to load any information about them at all. Then the third phase is this ongoing, managing the life cycle of trading partners. And what gets particularly messy there is certificate management. Certificates expire or they become compromised, and you find you're constantly trying to update the certificates or credentials. People forget their passwords or whatever. And so that whole credential and certificate management is a lot of burden, and it has to be done, and it has to be done well. Trading partners need to provide this, like new certificates, in a timely manner. If they don't, then you get outages, okay? And in addition to that, new partners have to be brought on board, and you have to revoke access to old trading partners. And with dynamic discovery, with that part of the e-delivery building block, that eliminates all of this effort as well. All the certificate management is done inside the e-delivery network using dynamic discovery. So this is another huge savings, which not only saves time and money, but it actually prevents outages. Then, so IBM talks to primarily the large customers, but the e-delivery building block helps the small trading partners as well. If you think of a small a medical device manufacturer that wants to sell to the National Health Services for all the 28 member states in the European Union, if every single member state used a different communication method, some use AS4, some use AS2, some use SFTP, some encrypt, some don't, then it becomes a huge burden on a small trading partner to try to actually deal with 28 different governments. Now, in addition to that, in addition to simplifying, I guess, the integration for the small supplier, it actually helps us service providers deliver our products at a lower price point, which also helps them a lot. And there's an entire ecosystem now around. There's open source software for various functions of the e-delivery network and setting up an access point. That whole ecosystem also helps. So finally, I guess in summary, my dream is to make B2B like your phone. I've been working on that for decades. And the e-delivery building block is actually a significant step in that direction. For the part of the whole communication piece, it's really a big step. And in our experience, it reduces costs, it removes barriers, it accelerates implementation, it improves security because it institutionalizes best practices through the profile. And I think it's an excellent example of how government and industry can work together to improve the climate for business and the lives of your citizens. And my recommendation is that you leverage as much as possible the e-delivery building block. And IBM, we have created a service which utilizes this. And I'm not going to talk about IBM and our services too much, but at the end of this presentation, if I can get there, if you go out and look in procurement, Pebble Procurement or IBM and procurement, you can see plenty of YouTube videos that describe our services and exactly how e-delivery network works and what we offer. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you for thinking on your feet. I do love being up in front of a very technologically savvy audience and going, the tech's not working. Our next speaker is Mark Greenaway, who is the Director of Digital Media at Adobe. And of course, we all know Adobe, and it is a certified trust service. So tell us more, Mark.
Thank you for the introduction. Mark Greenaway, responsible for the core digital media business for Adobe for Europe and some of the very high growth businesses that Adobe has within Europe as well, one of which is electronic and digital signatures. Delighted to be here today. I've gone forward one already. Delighted to be here today. Thank you for the invitation. Very pleased to share the stage with a couple of a very important customer in Barclays, a very important body of our customers in GSMA, and a very important partner to us in IBM. I'm going to talk a little bit about what Adobe is trying to do to enable trust services, to enable the adoption of the IDaaS standard, and some views that we have around accelerating this process. So why Adobe? Adobe's been around for 35 years. Permit me to say 35 years this very week. Okay, so in technology industry terms, that's quite a long time. Okay, that's when Adobe was founded, there were only 10 member states in the EU. Okay, so in that time, a big part of what Adobe's done is drive standards, and PDF being a very important one, and there have been other standards that we've worked on since. PDF is something which Adobe's also given over to public standards bodies as well. So it's not just about enabling Adobe's business, it's about Adobe enabling productivity and progress for everyone. That's why Adobe believes it has an important stake in helping adoption of and driving the market. So what does Adobe do? Adobe comes from a core of enabling digitization of information, content, documents first and foremost. But more and more nowadays, it's not just about documents, it's not just about the creation of content. Although the creation of content, creativity, design is incredibly important. Because as business becomes more and more digital, as government services become more and more digital, the differentiator is the experience. Okay? It is not the product. The experience is the product. And adoption is one of the most important things that you can drive with experience. Okay? So you need to be able to create fantastic digital content, beautiful content, to attract people to use services. You need to create an amazing service. Think about it. You know, the very things that someone like Barclays is trying to do to create an experience that enables their customers and their other stakeholders to use their online services for their own benefit. And then it is about understanding deeply the data which is generated from that process and fulfilling that transaction, whatever that might be at the end. It might be the move of someone between two member states and move of their banking details, the banking service. It might be a government service but it is the creation of that experience, the delivery of that experience, the understanding of how that experience has been adopted, and also committing of the transaction at the end. Very often that does involve a signature, a digital signature or an electronic signature, and there's still there's still fragmentation across Europe in how electronic digital signatures are accepted, if at all. And we're a very strong believer in IDAS as a great platform, a world-leading platform to make changes on that. I'm similarly useless with the clicker as my friend from IBM. Sorry about that. So the Cloud Signature Consortium is something which Adobe has created as a independent body which is there to enable faster adoption of IDAS. Adobe is an e-signature provider, a digital signature provider. It is not the only digital signature provider, and Adobe does not seek to be, although it's a qualified trust service provider for validation of certificates, for timestamping of signatures, Adobe does not wish to be a service provider. We have 200 partners who are service providers and provide digital certificates. There are three things needed in order to bring eIDAS to a reality. There are solution providers, Adobe being one as an e-signature platform. There are technology providers, and hardware continues to be part of that. The tokens that you might have, but tokens, hardware are difficult aspects of delivering qualified signatures. And there are also services, trust providers, all the variety of both qualified and advanced trust providers. I don't know the extent to which everyone in the room understands the difference between electronic signatures, which are accepted in certain countries, and it's based on non-repudiation, is based on being able to demonstrate that something was signed, time, place, and by a person. Advanced signatures, which is a third-party certificate provider who can validate in their terms that someone is the person they say they are, right through to what my friend from Barclays was talking about, which is qualified signatures and demonstrating that an identity exists and that the person who claims that identity is the valid claim or of that identity. Okay, so the Cloud Signature Consortium is a body which Adobe has helped found with a number of other service providers to provide the closest thing to a standard which matches the IDAS standard. Okay, and a platform from which this can become a standard or remain a de facto standard. Okay, why? Electronic signatures are going to be a more and more important part of the way that we transact. Okay, the electronic signature market, the digital signature market, is growing, I would say, somewhere around 50% just in Europe, year on year, compound. And part of that is that the whole digital experience, the whole adoption of digital services is becoming more and more mobile. Okay, 7 billion mobile devices. Mobile browser, mobile apps are becoming the way that you engage with the organizations that you are a customer of or a partner of, or the government that you are seeking to work with. This can accelerate business. We believe that we can improve compliance and also improve the customer experience, since the customer experience is just one of the key drivers of uptake and therefore success of standards like this. Okay? So with the Cloud Signature Consortium, Adobe believes that we can help enable the digital single market and the adoption of the IDAS standard. Okay? And just to summarize, this brings together solution providers like Adobe, but not exclusively Adobe, with an e-signature platform. Technology providers, including those who provide hardware, devices or applications, and service providers who provide advanced and qualified identity. Okay? Why do standards matter? And how are they helping make this vision of a digital single market a reality? Standards accelerate adoption. If you don't understand what standard you're trying to meet, it is much more difficult to understand where to commit and invest. Standards create a degree of choice. With the standard, you can then choose a platforms within that standard, which are guaranteed to meet that standard, rather than trying to hedge your bets or wait and see. Standards also drive compliance. So there is less likelihood of something which is divergent, tangential to the standard which IDAS tries to implement, for example. So in Adobe, we believe our heritage demonstrates that we are good at doing this, that we have the right intentions in doing this, and we have a heritage of creating standards which have been very, very widely adopted. I don't know how many PDFs there are now in the world, but we're in the many, many billions. We can't count them. Okay. So Adobe is a qualified trust service provider, but only in terms of the delivery of the solution, the delivery of the signatures platform. It is not seeking to be a trust service provider across all aspects of delivering identity solely on these signatures. Okay. Now, so a couple of years back, a report was commissioned from PwC. We think this is a really great treatment of what's really challenging about implementing the IDAS. This is a 163-page report. Okay, you're welcome to read it. It's not published yet, I don't think, but it's in final draft form as of last month, and it really identifies the key barriers to adoption of eIDAS and common standards for ID and electronic signature. And there are probably 5 key areas which need to be tackled. One is quite simply awareness. Are citizens, organizations fully aware of IDAS, fully aware of what services are available to them? That is a major impact on adoption. Second one is complexity of adopting some of these services for the end user. Third one is legislation, government legislation, which in member states still might conflict with or hinder the adoption of some of these services. And cost, fourth one being cost and complexity of implementing some of these services. The building blocks, which have been discussed and talked about by IBM, are one way of mitigating that cost. Adobe's offering, partners' offerings, and other players in the market's offerings are another way of doing that. All valid. Okay? And finally, it was a European web browser. So of those 5 things, there are 2 things which Adobe can help with. There are 2 barriers which Adobe can help remove, as defined in this report. We can't do anything about awareness, okay, but we can certainly work with the Commission. We can make it a lot easier through delivering a great digital experience to adopt some of these services, to make it easier to adopt some of these services. One of the biggest challenges is the acquisition of the identity in the first place. Not so much using the identity, but using the identity is another aspect. Once you have a certificate, where is it? Is it on a device? Well, we're increasingly detached from our desktop devices. We're more and more on mobile. Online access is becoming mobile. There's no growth in access to the internet via desktop devices. It's all mobile. In fact, even the tablet device is not growing as much as the smartphone. Okay, the traffic is all smartphones. Therefore, where is the certificate going to be? Where's the identity going to be stored? The hardware is not a great way of doing it either. Those get lost or damaged. They're expensive to maintain. Okay, so it's the online experience which is really fundamental. Okay, the other one is cost and complexity of implementing. Okay, providing a solution based on the electronic signature platform, which ties in an existing or a new trust service provider, is a great way of mitigating the cost of implementing IDAS. Okay, so I would commend the Cloud Signature Consortium as a great basis for how we accelerate the adoption of IDAS, how we accelerate the delivery of electronic ID and electronic signatures to speed process, not just within member states, but across member states. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark. So that was a kind of a very whistle-stop tour through the private sector and how they're currently using some of the building blocks. I've been keeping an eye on Twitter as well. I did tell you we have the hashtag. Things that are garnering some interest include Mark's comments that the experience is the product, David's dream to make business-to-business as easy as using a phone. People like that. Max's comment very early on that building blocks are like Lego and foster creativity. And Isabel, you will not be surprised to learn that Brexit has been mentioned as well. So with that, I'm going to invite up our MEP special speaker, Kaya Kallas, to give us her perspective on how we can connect Europe with building blocks.
Thank you. I'm very honored to be here and very nice place as well. My topic today is creating a connected digital single market benefits for the citizens. I must say that before starting to work in the European Parliament, I never thought about whether Estonia is somehow more advanced in digital issues than the rest of the Europe. And then I came to the European Parliament. I actually didn't think about the digital solutions that we use every day before they were all taken from me. So I suddenly understood what I'm missing. Consumer behaviors have changed. So Moses Naim has written in his book, The End of Power, that there are three things that characterize the digital revolution. It's more mobility mentality. So we have more of everything. We have more people, more countries, more solutions, more offers, more goods and services, more possibilities. Mobility means that people, goods, services, money moves anywhere in the world really fast and with no barriers. And mentality reflects that change in our mentality. We also want more of everything where we are at the moment, so anywhere in the world. So it means that digital environment in its essence is global, and very many companies have understood that you can reach any person anytime. The governments should also understand that, because otherwise they're left behind. Digital revolution has shifted our lives towards online, so it is said that we are currently living our own lives. As said, laws have to catch up with this new reality and remove the artificial barriers, which is also a goal of the digital single market. So there are several points I want to share. First of all, I'm very often asked, what is the most important thing, the one thing that you would do to make the digital single market work? And my answer is secure and encrypted digital identities. Because if we are living our own lives, then we also have to know who are the people that we are doing the transactions with. For years, the benefits of anonymity on the net outweighed its drawbacks. People felt more free to express themselves, which was especially valuable if they were dissidents or hiding a personal secret. But anonymity has poisoned civil discourse, enabled hacking, permitted cyberbullying, and made email a risk. Thus, secure digital identities can solve many problems. One big issue that we have and problems we have is with underage people on the internet. They get access to content that they would never get offline. If a young boy would go to a store and try to buy a pornographic magazine, nobody would sell it to them because everybody sees that he's not of that age. Whereas on the internet, it just is enough if they say that I'm 18 and nobody has to prove anything. But also, feedback issues in sharing economy, for example, that you can't manipulate this. And also using government digital services, which is also important. It would also drastically increase cybersecurity. Edward Lucas has written in his book Cyberphobia that password is a recipe for disaster. We have created a system where we expect people to use passwords which are hard for humans to remember but very easy for computers to guess. We should stop relying on passwords altogether what people need is digital identity and not multiple passwords that are hard to remember. I always bring this example that one of my friends was a judge, and they had so complicated passwords for every database that they had to go to. So what did the judges do? They just wrote down the passwords and put them under the keyboard. That wasn't too secure either. Not only the identity, but also the services that can be used once the identity problem is solved. What I mean by this is that not only that the governments provide people this digital identity, but they also provide the services where people can use their identities. So it increases the take-up of these identities. Otherwise, people would just say that, why do I need this? I don't need this. But for some reason, there's this misconcept that digital is somehow less trustworthy than paper-based processes are. And I'm really surprised by this. For example, if you compare digital signature with handwritten signature, so how do you really make sure that the handwritten signature is made by the person who it's claimed to be made? Who hasn't tried to imitate their parents' signature when they were in school? Well, I couldn't do that because my father's signature was on our money, but most of my friends didn't have that problem. So how do you really check that? So second point, governments also have to provide the digital identities, but also have to provide digital services that I said. A good example is, of course, the taxation that is often brought that in Estonia, when you can file the taxes online really fast, it's even under 2 minutes. So you also get the money back really fast. So it might be even a day when you get the money back, and that's always a motivation for the person. And what this needs is that governments have to change the mentality as well. So governments should be partners to the people and companies. So governments also always have a choice when they interact with the citizens. Just one example, there are lots of processes when if you don't do these things, then you get sanctioned. But actually, the work that the governments have to do on their side is the same. I just bring this very positive example that I have from Estonia, that I got an email from my government saying that, by the way, your driver's license is expiring. Well, I didn't know that because we don't use the driver's license. It's all digital, but still, you know, you have to have a license and it's issued for you in a definite time. So, and you have two choices. Either you go to the place where you can do all the processes, or you can do it digitally, and we send it to your mail. So I did. Went to this website. You know, tick. Is that your signature? Tick. Is that still your picture? Do you still like your picture? Yes. So you tick all these health records. Everything is there because the government already has that data. And check. Digitally sign, and voila, in 3 days, this new driver's license was in my mail. So instead of punishing me after this license has expired, if the police stops me, the government actually helps me to comply. Now, all these solutions that might make the lives of people easier might be, and usually are, in the heads of people with the entrepreneurial mindset. And this brings me to my fourth point. In order to make it possible for them to develop different solutions, the governments need to make their data open. Of course, I'm not saying anything to compromise the data protection regulations, but there is a lot of data that the governments have that is not personal data at all. But making it open could help a lot to make the companies and people come up with the solutions that actually help the citizens. And the fifth point is that the change of the mindset of the governments also means that the governments will be more or should be more open to experiments and innovation. For example, if we talk about public procurement, then very often it is only based on the lowest price. But there is also the innovation criteria in the public procurement rules.